Crash Team Racer Nitro Fueled is the greatest kart racer of all time, and that's for a multitude of reasons. The most important being the mechanics. Like how in Crash, drift boosting requires you to actively participate with timed button presses in a risk versus reward system, as opposed to Mario and Sonic, which just ask you to hold a button. But we're here to talk about the tracks. In terms of track themes, I'd say Mario Kart wins out, and in terms of music, I'd say the winner there is clearly Sonic R. But when it comes to track layouts, it easily goes to Crash. I'll explain why as I link every track in Crash Team Racer Nitro Fueled from worst to best. And just remember, this is my opinion. If you disagree with anything on this list, then you're wrong, and this is why nobody will ever love you. But seriously, with over 39 tracks for the PlayStation Chads, I doubt anyone who watches this will agree 100% with my order, and that's a-okay. So let's get ranking. Number 40, Slide Coliseum. The greatest thing about Crash Team Racing is the level of speed you're allowed to reach, and the level of control you're given in order to maintain it throughout the rest of the race. Slide Coliseum's design is antithetical to what makes the game so great, and as a result, it comes off as slow and boring in comparison. Not helped by the stadium design. If Slide Coliseum was the only stadium track, it'd be fine, but thanks to Turbo Track and Retro Stadium, the stadium aesthetic is the most repeated one in the track list, so it doesn't even stand out for that reason. Granted, they do mitigate this by having it take place at night, and the holographic dances are a nice touch, but it's a very bland track in most regards. I'm also not a fan of grass cuts, which are requirements on Slide Coliseum if you want to provide a good time. I have not done the developer time trial, and this track is one of the main reasons I never want to go for 100% completion. Number 39, Koala Carnival. It's an oval. Visually, Koala Carnival is probably the most beautiful track in the game. There's so many bright colors and the background details are so vibrant and plentiful, but it's just an oval. And look, I love Baby Park from Double Dash, which was similarly just an oval, but there are two key distinctions. One, Mario Kart is by design more accessible and less skill-based as a kart racer, so it's less important for them to design more intricate tracks. But more importantly, Baby Park is a much smaller track, so it essentially became a chaotic clutter of item spamming, which was fun in its own right. Because Koala Carnival is a big boy oval, it loses that chaotic element and just becomes about hugging the wall as best you can. I'm also biased against it because during the GP it was released in, I was once in a lobby that voted for it 6 times in a row, and I didn't want to just leave because that could mean 10 minutes of waiting to get into another lobby, but I finally bounced when they voted for it a 7th time. Number 38, Tiger Tempo. Tiger Temple is low for 2 reasons, the grass cuts and the shortcut. For the latter, the shortcut in Tiger Temple is the only shortcut in the game that is not accessed by skill, but instead accessed by luck. The only way to take it is to get one of the items that can be launched forward or to sneak in after someone opens it. And while I can appreciate the diversity having a shortcut like this can add, I personally don't enjoy doing poorly in a race because I didn't get the right item, nor is taking the shortcut satisfying since it's entirely on RNG. I mean, I guess you could miss your target, but you'd have to be really bad to miss a bullseye that big. Of course, I assume you can make it up with those grass cuts, and yeah, I don't like them, and I won't even pretend like I could do the massive cut. In fairness, if you don't care about winning and just play the track like the CPUs, or in one of the other modes that require you to take the basic route, Tiger Temple can actually be quite fun. But doing that online or in the time trial, which is where most of my playtime is spent, you're going to wind up performing poorly. Playing optimally makes it less fun, which should never be the case, and even then, your placement online will still be determined by RNG more so than the other tracks. Number 37, Mystery Caves. It's not the high road, but bouncing off those turtles still never truly feels right, and that shortcut near the beginning is always a pain, and is perhaps the most annoying to mess up with how slow it becomes. I don't really have as much to say on this one, honestly. The fireball section is kinda cool, but I just never really care for Mystery Caves. It's not actively awful or anything, but it's not particularly exciting. Though it's a telling sign how I like CTR that we're already at a point where I basically like the tracks. Number 36, Turbo Track. Yes, there's grass cuts, which I'm not huge on, and yes, the stadium aesthetic is the most repeated in the game, and yes, there is that pain in the butt U-turn section. That pain in the butt U-turn section is exactly why it ranked higher than Mystery Caves, because while I'm not good at it, it is interesting. It is an appropriate challenge of skill that can be satisfying to pull off even semi-decently. The rest of the track does feel like filler in comparison. It's basically a one-segment track, but I personally think that one segment is pretty fun. Number 35, Retro Stadium. It's Turbo Track but pixelated and exclusive, giving me a false sense of superiority for one in the PlayStation version, so it's easily the better version of the track. Number 34, Jungle Boogie. Short and sweet, but not remarkable. It's a fun little race through and not much more. The only thing really holding it back is that first shortcut. The ledge isn't really fun to drive on, and the penalty for messing up feels pretty severe. It's more of a nitpick than anything else, though. Number 33, Coco Park. The beginner's track for how wide and simplistic it is. I surprisingly don't hate the first grass cut shortcut on here, though I'm not in love with it or anything. Always feels kind of weird. I love the track's aesthetics, namely those weird things watching in the stand that move so weirdly. Not much to say about this one though, it's fairly basic but beautiful. The one thing I hate about it is where they placed the Beenox crate. That was an evil decision, and even knowing where it was, I recall it taking me ages to actually hit it. Number 32, Papu's Pyramid. I know this is a popular track, so let me make it clear. I do like Papu's Pyramid, mostly. The track is gorgeous. I like how compact it is with shortcuts. Hitting the second one, then landing on that ledge shortcut is difficult, but so satisfying. And I like the challenge of the soft turns at the beginning, though hitting the final turbo pad and maintaining speed is probably the most frustrating thing for me to accomplish in the game, and for that reason, Papu's Pyramid was the most difficult Velo time trial for me. I also hate the Venus flytraps. They're fairly easy to avoid, but anytime you run over their vines, you're forced into a drawn-out cinematic that kills the soul. I also hate that moment in the relic race where they ask you to jump off the spiral and do it again. Number 31, Rouge Tubes. A fairly straightforward track, but the aquatic tubes give this track a unique flair to the visuals that I really appreciate, and I also love the dinosaur bones at the ending of the stage, which isn't just background aesthetics, but an actual obstacle. If you go that route, I love the final shortcut and trying to squeeze in tight between the wall and the light. All around, fun track. Number 30, Crass Cove. You deceptive bastard! I love that this is the first track in the game, and also one of the most difficult tracks in the game. I really don't have much to say on this one, it's just really fun to race through its deceptively simple design. As an acceleration main, I'm not crazy enough to attempt William P, but the Velo time trial was a good fun time to get down and conquer. Number 29, Spyro Circuit. There's quite a bit I don't like about Spyro Circuit in comparison to Crass Cove, like the wizards or people leaving items in the portals, but what puts this over is how much of a love letter it is to Spyro Run, fittingly the only Spyro I've really played. All the usual components of Crass being replaced by Spyro elements is a really nice touch, whether it be the gems or sparks. It really helps make this track stand out. I also love the music and think the track design here is a bit more varied and involved than Crass Cove. In terms of difficult Velo time trials, Spyro Circuit is second only to Papu's Pyramid for me, but I do think it's a fun track to practice and get good at, more so than Papu's. Number 28, Sewer Speedway. There are two types of opinions when it comes to Sewer Speedway. Those who hate the shortcut and those who hate the barrels. I won't keep you in suspense. I hate the barrels. Not enough to be a huge detractor, obviously, considering I still placed it over several strong tracks, but certainly the main factor of it not going any higher. The shortcut was awful originally, but now it's pretty swell. You barely need any speed at all to reach it. You just need proper timing and it's quite fun to hit. Nobody really takes the full shortcut, but that's why I like that the Relic Race encourages you to go down that path. It's a pretty cool area and makes playing its Relic Race feel more distinct from actually racing on it. Number 27, Inferno Island. It's Crass Cove again, but easier and with a cooler aesthetic taking place at night and everything. It's really all the visual alterations Beenox made in the Nitro Fueled version that places this above Crass Cove, and the fact that I perform better at it doesn't hurt. The music also slaps a lot, probably my favorite track up to this point in the list. Not that music was a large factor in determining the order. A fun track to play for sure. Number 26, Dragon Mines. I used to hate this track. This was the track that was preventing me from beating all of Oxide's time trials and getting the platinum. That damn spiral ridge turn was the bane of my existence, and the minecart shortcut felt like a cruel joke that only made matters worse. But in a sense, that's why I love Dragon Mines and why I love CTR so much more than other car races, because your growth is far more tangible here. After learning U-turning, I love the spiral bridge. I don't always do it perfectly, but it's no longer killing my runs all the time. Having struggled so much with Oxide, it was incredible to see just how much easier dealing with Velo was despite having less time to work with. And after that, there's even more tangible growth with the minecart shortcut. I'd argue the most difficult shortcut in the game. I still can't do it, but I love that Dragon Mines essentially serves as a benchmark for skill levels. It's hated on way too much. Number 25, Cortex Castle. This is low somewhat bitterly because it's the only Blue Fire track, besides maybe Turbo/Retro, that I've yet to be able to hold Blue Fire for the full duration of the lap, and made it one of the more frustrating velo times. But that's a small quibble. The aesthetics here are really cool. The more narrow corridors and sharp turns keep this track constantly engaging. I like the branched paths near the beginning. Even if it's small, it's providing us with the option of a longer but easier and quicker but harder route, which is also appreciated. I don't really find the spider obstacles all that annoying, and while you'll never really notice it in the heat of the race, the windows in this track are all brilliant homages to the series. Number 24, Hyper Spaceway. For what was supposed to be the big final race of C&K, it sort of pales in comparison to Oxide Station and Nitro Fueled. This is of course because Nitro Fueled cut out an entire segment of this race when porting it over, which is a shame because how quick it is certainly diminishes the epic feel it's supposed to have. The mostly empty stands don't help either. But it's still a fun track, and more fun than the C&K version by virtue of CTR having far better controls. Also want to start out this level for being the easiest way to complete those airtime challenges. It's not relevant anymore since I've cleaned out the pit stop, but doing Ring Rally on this track also made completing those a breeze. Number 23, Assembly Lane. Assembly Lane has one problem and one problem only, the conveyor belt. Even when I do it right, it just feels awkward, but besides that, this is a really fun track. I really like that there are 3 distinct segments to this track, all with their own different vibes to them, yet flow into each other naturally. From the dirt beginners to the outside pipe grate segment, it keeps it a visually interesting playthrough without sacrificing thematic semblance. Not huge on the mud cuts, but for the most part you don't have to bother with them, except with maybe the developer time trial, so it's not much of an issue. Number 22, Android Alley. Android Alley is pretty simple but really fun, and being the first to hit the shortcut inside of the glass is always satisfying in a way that actively depresses me when I can't reach it first online, which is often. The train obstacle is kind of weird, mostly in how much of a failure Aku Aku is, but beyond that, it adds to the stage's theme in a nice way and is rather easy to avoid, so in general, I like it. It's also one of the better stages for Wumpa payouts, so that's a nice benefit it has going for it. Number 21, Dingo Canyon. I feel like Dingo Canyon is pretty underrated. I understand the water bit can be a bit awkward and our moms can be pretty annoying at times, but the track can be a blast. The turbo pad turn is really satisfying to pull off. I love that the cactus shortcut at the beginning has 2 layers, one being rather easy and the other being why bother, but it's a nice option to reward people who are better at the game than I. And even though I hate the motorcycle levels in Warped, I appreciate just how much this level takes from them. Maybe more so than any other stage, this track feels like we're racing through a Crash Bandicoot level. Number 20, Tiny Arena. The Warrior Stadium of CTR, and for those keeping track, one of the top 4 non-Blue Fire tracks in the game. Tiny Arena proudly declares shortcuts for pussies, features no real obstacles to get in your way, and everything is sealed off so there's no possibility of falling off. Tiny Arena is a direct challenge to your CTR skills in a way that's more befitting the appeal of CTR than Slide Coliseum, since there is still a sense of speed and keeping your flame from the boost pass can be a satisfying challenge with all the twists and turns of the track. Some of the ways you can cut corners in this track just look insane and feel really cool to pull off, even semi-correctly. Number 19, Meteor Gorge. Meteor Gorge is just a fun, quick blast, not much more to really say outside of the music is slick, and it has a very punk hazard aesthetic to it, which I certainly appreciate. It's also a very beginner-friendly track, as it was the first stage I ever sustained my boost for an entire lap for. It's just short, simple fun, with some easy shortcuts that can make it more engaging than some of the other simplistic tracks. Number 18, Lizard Bluff. Another track that can be just a quick and fun blast, but once you start playing it optimally, it functions much in the same way that Dragon Mines does, as a benchmark for skill with 2 difficult shortcuts right next to each other. I remember struggling with the first jump for a while, and then the fence shortcut for even longer, but now that I can pull off both, though I usually don't perform the fence optimally, the track has gotten a lot more fun. It's one of the only developer time trials I've actually managed to beat as well, and I just generally love snowy aesthetics. Number 17, Deep Sea Diving. Few things can be more frustrating than the fans at the end, but even fewer things can be more satisfying than going through the ending title without hitting a single one in maintaining speed. The fans do hurt it more than help it, I feel, but beyond that, this is a very fun track to blaze through with Blue Fire, and I think aesthetically is very cool. I love the sea monster. Also worth noting that with maybe one exception, Deep Sea Diving has my favorite song in the game. Number 16, Tiny Temple. Online Tiny Temple is worse than online Deep Sea Diving, partially because of all the idiots that put the fire on the left side, but mostly because getting hit by the blue fire pad at the end will cost you the race entirely. There's little chance of rebounding from that since there's only one of those pads, there's not even a weaker blue fire pad, and there's less obstacles to hit those in front of you. Aside from that massive annoyance, Tiny Temple is a blast. The song is still great, my third favorite after Megamix and Deep Sea, and one of the easiest tracks to maintain in Blue Fire. This is the track that taught me how to maintain Blue Fire, that got me accustomed to the speed so I could do it more efficiently on other stages, which gives it the edge for me over Deep Sea Diving. It also doesn't have fans. Number 15, Barren Ruins. The best non-Blue Fire track in the game, and I don't think I can properly explain why it's my favorite. It's definitely a fun track that you can just breeze through similar to Meteor Gorge, but it has a few more nuances to it that make it a more engaging playthrough. The ice in the beginning turns, the puffer ball being the biggest threat of all the player activated hazards, the bumpy stones afterward, a shortcut that can easily be cucked with items, the robot obstacles, the little snow bump you can jump off at the beginning, and I love the seahorses. Number 14, Megamix Mania. I don't care much for the Mad Max aesthetic that came with the Rustland GP, but this stage is so metal and incredibly fun. The song slaps so hard, it may be the best song in the entire game. The shortcuts are really satisfying to pull off, especially the big one. Incorporating Ensign's battleship is a nice touch, but I love that they incorporate Wu's tubes into this. That is such a cool touch to see the apocalyptic version of that stage. The final stretch provides multiple paths that are actually worthwhile to use. The far left isn't for competitive play, but it's nice for beginners, but the middle and right path are both viable. I believe the middle is faster, but it's got that risk-reward element to it. I do feel like the final boost pad there can eat my inputs a bit, and the time trials are brutal, but this is an excellent stage. Number 13, Drive Through Danger. The final track in one hell of a finale. There's so much to love about this track. For starters, it has the most pronounced player involvement in how it plays out, with the first person being able to choose pizza or burger. I'm a Pizza Steve, by the way. But it really tests all the abilities you have and provides a track that is exploding with shortcuts. I think there's about 8 shortcuts, which is insane. And the time trials here are pretty forgiving. Probably not the developer time, but I definitely fell off the track at least once when I beat Velo's time. The theme of an outer space restaurant is also just really fun. Number 12, Prehistoric Playground. I love dinosaurs, so that alone made me a fan of this track. Obviously, the item spamming at the beginning here is definitely problematic online, and that's namely what keeps it out of the top 10, but that aside, I have a lot of fun with this track. I think the shortcuts are really fun, especially the mountain one at the beginning. I love the varied amount of branch and path. Granted, I always stick to the left. I believe that's the optimal route, but I do love the notion that more than any other track, I could race through Prehistoric Playground and have a different experience each time. The spiral at the end can be a bit of a pain, and I've definitely never done it as well as I've seen others do it, but it still adds a fun, somewhat frustrating element of the level to master. Number 11, Twilight Tour. Another simple track for mastering Blue Fire, and one with the really cool Egyptian and Arabian theme, as well as a cool day-night cycle depending on which part of the track you're on. So visually it's great, and it really feels like it was inspired by actual levels in Crash, which is always a plus. Admittedly, it's a beginner track, but I think it serves its purpose well as one, especially for teaching players like myself about the 2 different Blue Fire speeds. And I don't love the second shortcut, though thankfully, it isn't really required most of the time. Only having Wumpa crates available via Flying Carpet Guy is probably the biggest knock on the level, though I do like that you're basically guaranteed to be juiced if he shows up for you. Number 10, Nina's Nightmare. Aesthetically speaking, Nina's Nightmare is my favorite track in the game. I like the horror gothic motifs throughout, it just looks incredible. But beyond that, it has some really cool design choices that really elevate it. For one, it's the only stage in CTR that has some form of levolution with the Pumpkin's Drool. It's not much, and I really wish Beanox added a segmented racetrack before probably the Great Wall of China, but at least Nina's Nightmare includes something that naturally alters the track each lap. But secondly, the blue fire pad being right before the narrow corridor of the track is genius and makes maintaining the blue fire more difficult and more rewarding. This is one of only 2 tracks in the game that immediately places you in a tight position after achieving blue fire, rather than an open space. Rather than a freebie like usual, it's something you have to earn. I guess Mega Mix Mania does it if you choose to take the shortcut, but since it's not required, it's not really the same thing. It also has ghosts that appear out of smashed crates you can catch, that I'm fairly certain is pointless, but it helps further distinguish it. Number 9. Clockwork Wumpa. Much like Dragon Mines, I originally hated Clockwork Wumpa. When I started playing, C&K tracks were my preference because they were a lot more open and beginner friendly than many of the tracks featured in CTR, but the sole exception was Clockwork Wumpa, which featured far more neo designs and sharper turns. And now that I've grown as a player, I've grown to love this stage. It's one of the most satisfying tracks to maintain blue fire on. It does have one of the weirdest shortcuts with the gears, which are set up in such a way that I thought it was the regular intended path until someone knocked me off of it. Number 8. Gingerbread Joyride. My favorite bonus track, another really tight track that's compacted with a lot of shortcuts and tight turns that's incredibly satisfying to blaze through with blue fire. The first shortcut is pretty awkward, but in a good way. It felt really good to get consistent at landing it, though I don't always keep blue fire after it. The biggest knock against the stage is that landing on the snow in that patch can cause an out of bounds, which makes no sense and really hurts the track. And I don't love the jellies, but they're easy enough to avoid, and I love how it ties to Christmas, because you always have 2 drunk idiots fighting outside around Christmas time. I really like the second shortcut that you can pull off without blue fire. It's just very difficult. The theme of the track is really nice, the music complements it well. It really is a gingerbread joyride. Number 7. Thunderstruck! Part of the reason I love this track is because a lot of people seem to struggle with it, which makes it one of the easier tracks to do well on online. But fair play, it is a difficult track, and that's why I love it. The Big Boy shortcut is such a hard experience to go for, but I love landing it, and because of that, I was able to beat the death time for Thunderstruck. I mean, the game glitched in my favor, but we take those. The original Thunderstruck in C&K was pretty boring. The spike swings were super easy to avoid since you just went left to right in a straightforward path, but the addition of blue fire and the more complex design make them a far more engaging element to avoid, and one I love doing. Aesthetically, it's very cool, and the music is good, better than anything AC/DC released, I'll tell you that much. Excellent track. Number 6. Engine Labs. Probably the easiest track for maintaining blue fire. It was my go-to for the challenge of maintaining it for 5 laps straight, I believe. Just a really fun stage to blast through with interesting visuals and background details like the production of engines mechs. The shortcuts here are pretty cool. I love jumping down onto the earlier blue fire pad near the end. It's one of the coolest things in the game, having an earlier part of the track being useful near the end of the race. The track just feels a lot more interconnected because of that. The one thing that hurts it for me is I hate the relic race. It seems like you have to basically perfect it when several of the boxes are placed in such awkward locations, and I've yet to be able to beat it, even on easy. Number 5. Oxide Station. The fact that Oxide Station is only number 5 shows how amazing this game's tracks are, because Oxide Station is a masterpiece. With its length and no shortcut approach, it's very similar to Tiny Arena, but has a lot more frequent and tighter turns, and has the element of blue fire, which means you can go through the stage very quickly. This is the other track that immediately places you in a tight position after achieving blue fire, but it's like Nina's Nightmare on crack, since it's a far more extensive segment. Making it to the next lap with blue fire always feels like validation. Number 4. Out of Time. I'm so glad they removed the sandworms, because they probably would have changed the ranking drastically. This is just such a well-designed, challenging track that makes such good use of the blue fire. I love the shortcuts. Yes, the fence can be annoying, but it's so satisfying to pull off. I love that the second shortcut has 2 variants you can pull off. The Big Boy version and then the version I can pull off. The music is kind of funny, and the clock castle is cool. That and the vines keep things visually interesting. I love U-turning after getting the blue fire and hugging the corner. It's such a simple thing, but it feels so nice to do. And honestly, I know a lot of people struggled with the velo time. It was one of my easier ones. Maybe because I saved it till the end, but Papu's Pyramid, Cortex Castle, and Spiral Circuit were my nightmares. Out of Time was a cakewalk. Number 3. Polar Pass. Polar Pass was the first developer time trial I ever completed, and it's genuinely one of the best tracks in the the game, it would easily be my favorite had it not been for one thing. The first shortcut jump. The one from the ice platform, not the other version. That original version is my most inconsistent shortcut. I never really feel like I'm doing something different. I'm sure it's my fault, but I can never tell what I'm doing wrong when I fail or what I'm doing right when I succeed. And I refuse to go the main path. I have essentially forfeited online races because I will not proceed unless I hit that shortcut. The bigger version you can do with Blue Fire is far easier, and I don't often mess it up. The challenge is more so in getting there or keeping Blue Flame afterwards. And while I heard it's possible to do the big boy version without Blue Fire, it's certainly not a good idea to go for it without it. And I really do like that this section of the track has a better version of the shortcut, mostly accessible only with Blue Fire because it adds a form of revolution to it. Not one based on the game naturally altering the track, but one that rewards you with different routes to take in later laps by performing well. And this is true in two places, as another shortcut is available at the very end of the lap if you held on to Blue Flame. There are other shortcuts that are mostly done through having Blue Fire, like in Mega Mix or Gingerbread, but you can perform those in the first lap. Polar Pass having those only available in the second and third laps makes them far more gratifying and adds a sense of progression to the track not featured in any other stage. However, it's not a consistently fun playthrough, and I know that's more on me, but I can't deny that the amount of frustration I feel with that first shortcut exceeds anything else in the game, and the sales are kind of annoying as well. Still, absolutely love Polar Pass. Number 2, Electron Avenue, the best CNK track. I fell in love with this track immediately, in large part due to its neon 80s aesthetics, and the music ain't half bad, but there's so much more to this track than its fantastic presentation. The amount of Blue Fire pads and tricky turns requiring U-turns in order to maintain Blue Fire make Electron Avenue both one of the faster paced and skillful tracks in all of CTR. Maintaining Blue Fire all throughout feels incredible, and I like the amount of cohesion. Multiple segments with boost pads and electric fences, and 2 different tunnels with the same activation switch. The repeated challenges don't make the track feel repetitive because there are differences in application, like the shortcut you can use on the first electric fence. It just makes the track feel more cohesively put together. It also has the best Wumpa payout in the game, which is always a plus. And number 1, Hot Air Skyway. CTR's Rainbow Road, sacrificing the godly music for far more interesting track design. Aesthetically, I love the stage. The backdrop, sky, and clouds are all just beautiful, and I love the gambling/casino aesthetic added to the nitro-fueled version. Even though the ending shortcut can be frustrating, it is satisfying to pull off and becomes less problematic once you know the proper positioning. And you turning around the corner when you're unsure, like when I lose Flame, is not necessarily optimal, but it's still fun to pull off, and you won't lose much speed. The main reason I love Hot Air Skyway is because it places its only Blue Fire pad right near the beginning of the track. Most Blue Fire pads are placed near the end of the track, like in Polar Pass, Tiny Temple, Clockwork Rumpa, Out of Time, Oxide Station, or Nita's Nightmare, for example. And a lot of the ones that do put them in the beginning will be littered with Blue Fire pads like Engine Labs or Electron Avenue. Hot Air Skyway isn't the only track that gives a single one near the beginning. Mega Mix Mania, Gingerbread Joyride, and Drive-Thru Danger all do this too, and I find this to be the most exhilarating method because you could go through the entire stage with Blue Fire, but you only got one shot early in the lap, and that makes maintaining it for so long all the more satisfying. But why is Hot Air Skyway better than any of the other examples listed? I think that comes down to track design, because there's plenty of opportunity to fall off and fail, and a few instances to bump against the rails and lose speed, so it's definitely a difficult track, but unlike Drive-Thru Danger, it doesn't necessarily require as much constant attention and skill. There's this brief straight stretch of track in Hot Air Skyway which can spell danger with items, but otherwise functions as an easy stress alleviation part. You don't want to waste reserves, so you should be boosting, but it poses no significant challenge. It's just a nice breather moment in between all the fast-paced U-turning and driving, right before one of the more annoying shortcuts, giving you ample time to mentally prepare. And it doesn't feature any potentially annoying cycle-based obstacle like the sails, or moms, or the jellies, and again, I love the themes and aesthetics of this track. There's a lot of fantastic tracks in Crash Team Racing, and Hot Air Skyway won by a thin margin. Honestly, depending on my mood, you could probably catch me saying anything from the top 15 is my favorite track in the game. I do definitely tend to prefer the tracks with heavier emphasis on Blue Fire because the reserve system is one of the primary reasons I love CTR so much that I'm naturally going to prefer tracks that incorporate that element in more noticeable ways. I know there are plenty of people who prefer tracks without Blue Fires, and those people can be safely ignored. I jest, and I rest my case. Thank you so very much for watching.